What up, comics world? This is Splendopia. We're back. Rob Casey here. When I say we're back, I haven't done a video in a couple of weeks. Had some pretty exciting and tumultuous experiences the last few weeks. But I'm happy to report that everybody in Casey Land is in improving health and safe, and property damage is still being assessed. I'm from Anchorage, Alaska. You may have heard on Friday there was a massive earthquake that hit Anchorage Square. For us, one of the things that happened was my mom, like us kids, didn't really know where she was. So when the earthquake hit, she is in her 70s. And we were a little bit worried. For the first hour, we were like, all right, we still haven't heard from her. And then we started like looking around the city for her and couldn't come up with her. And then we realized, we sort of had a sense that she starts volunteering at the local jail to teach prisoners how to get their GED. Long story short, my mom is not dead. Thought for about an hour that she might be, but actually she was at the Anchorage jail teaching. She was there to teach prisoners how to get their GED. What we found out was that she's a little goofy. We found out that the prison went on lockdown, and she was given the choice: do you want to get out of here, or what? We can get you out of here right before lockdown. She was like, no, it's okay. I'll stay for lockdown. So my mom was on lockdown with all the prisoners at the Anchorage jail after the earthquake. We couldn't get in touch with her. We didn't know where she was, but she was fine. And I've got to say, even though my mom's a little bit goofy, I love her so much for that. She is, she's practically a saint. I don't choose to spend my time teaching prisoners in jail to get their GED, but she does, and good for her. But she's okay. Our properties are not, but that doesn't matter so much. Now I'm here to do the rest of these reviews for you. So, don't expect daily content out of my channel. That's not what I'm all about. I'm doing this channel. I'm not trying to create a media empire or anything like that. I'm just trying to communicate with fans and communicate with other YouTubers about me as a creator, my tastes, and also my upcoming project, Cyborg USA, which we're working on, and we're going to get out soon. There's some big plans, and that is all going great. In the meantime, let's get into these G.I. Joe reviews. G.I. Joe is like probably the big way that I got into comics. I used to read all these, and we're going to talk about some of these issues. This issue right here, issue number 22, this brings like a lot of storylines to close. This is sort of a denouement of the great story that's kicked off with like 3 strikes for Snake Eyes in the last trade. Dr. Quinn, Venom, Dr. Venom and Quinn. Wow, I wonder if that's where they came up with that. Are dead. General Flag is dead. And this issue is Larry cleaning up house like chimney sweepers come to dust. Duke and Roadblock show up. They're basically cleaning up the pit. And there's a funeral. This is General Flag's funeral. And the Joes are attacked. And this is the first appearance of Roadblock and Duke. They just happen to show up at the funeral with the Madus and save the day. So Duke was a big deal for the toys, but Larry didn't really like him. He didn't really know what to do with him. He pops up here, and he's used for the next kind of couple issues, kind of sporadically. But even though in the cartoon he was like the leader of the Joe team, he's often associated or identified as the leader of G.I. Joe. Larry didn't really use him that way. Larry pretty much uses Hawk, Stalker, and Scarlet as the leader of G.I. Joe, and I actually prefer that. I think that trio of Scarlet, Stalker and Snake Eyes is like the heart of the GI Joe team. It's the heart of the characterization of the GI Joe team, and it's also like why I was a little disappointed. You know, my favorite character is Stalker, and I'm confident that the reason that they don't use Stalker in they haven't used him in a movie is because he's got a creepy name. Stalker is a creepy name, and it's associated with like other things these days, and they don't want a character named Stalker. But that's Lonzo Wilkerson right there. My favorite G.I. Joe character, and he's the top kick, the first sergeant before Duke shows up, and should continue to be. Now here, this issue number 23. This is the first issue. This is the Capture a Cobra Commander. This is the first issue that I ever had as a kid. So I bought this as a back issue. This was like the earliest issue that I was able to obtain at my local comic book store as a G.I. Joe fan, as a back issue. The others were either unavailable or, in the case of issue number 2, like priced out of my price range. So I have a really fond spot in my heart for this one. The story behind this, you got Duke and Roadblock. There's Snowjob, CoverGirl, and Clutch. They're all up in the Alps near Dr. Hunt Kinder's Burn Institute, and this guy does plastic surgery. If you recall, the Baroness has been burned in the attack when Major Blood left her behind, and she's up there getting her face restructured. There's a despicable Major Blood, and basically they're out there to. This is fun. This is Baroness revealing her new face, same as the old face, pretty much. And the funny thing about that is, like, Baroness was introduced as a character in issue number 1, mostly just to have somebody for Cobra Commander to bounce dialogue off of. But by the time this issue came out in 1984, there was a figure for her, and this issue kind of inaugurates her, bringing her figure in. What happens in this issue is Cobra Commander is taken captive by the Joe team, ultimately as like portrayed in the cover. And then the next issue, 24, Cobra Commander escapes. So like the silent issue number 21, kicks off these events where Storm Shadow is introduced, and Storm Shadow plays like a really pivotal part through the rest of the series. Larry really takes Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes and develops their relationship. And from this point on, for the rest of G.I. Joe, it's a lot of how Larry portrays the conflict or the epic of G.I. Joe. It's a soap opera, in a lot of ways, like about these two characters, sort of a yin and yang of like Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. For better or for worse, it's not my favorite part of the mythos. What I like about it is their roots in Vietnam, the fact that they're so close and then they become enemies, and the fact that, Stalker, my favorite character, is like included with them. We learn the story of Snake Eyes in a lot of ways through Stalker, because Snake Eyes is not able to speak. The art in this is really good. It's really stark. The backgrounds are really stark because of the kind of Arctic climate. He's there's a little minimalist. But I really like all this old style. I like kind of the simplicity of it and the vibrancy of it. And so basically through the rest of these stories, you're kind of knitting together this, like, one other thing that Larry portrays really well is like he calls G.I. Joe like a loyalty fantasy, and you really get that sense of it. The Joes are always looking out for each other. They've always got each other's back no matter what. They're never going to leave a man behind. That's like Stalker's defining characteristic. There's so many times in the run of G.I. Joe where a comrade falls and Stalker makes the choice he's going to carry the body, or he's going to carry the wounded all the way to safety, even though that imperils their escape. On the other hand, the villains, the Cobras, are always backbiting, always against each other, always sinisterly plotting each other's demise. And to me, that's what I love. That's what I love about the heart of G.I. Joe. That's what I love about the heart of the storytelling, the G.I. Joes versus the Cobras. So Storm Shadow is able to, in this story, he comes in on one of those claw gliders and helps Cobra Commander escape. But in the process, he's forced to be left behind. Cobra Commander, classic Cobra Commander move. As he's fleeing and leaving, his minion to be captured, he's promising rewards and riches. What's imperative for Cobra Commander is he's always cravenly trying to protect and save his own hide. So anyway, that's kind of how this issue ends. These issues, I've talked about this in previous videos. All these comic books were advertised on TV, and they served kind of a dual purpose to like sell the toy, but also to sell the comic book. Basically, to sell the comic book in order to sell the toy, and Larry, you can tell Larry has like mixed emotions about it. He wants to tell the story he wants to tell. He's also obligated to like introduce new characters, such as here at the end we see Zartan, Firefly, and Wild Weasel. They play a big role in the next few issues. And there's the Dragonfly and the Water Moccasin. That's all toys. That's like he's got to get him in. He's got to get him in to sell the toys. And sometimes he navigates it more gracefully than other times. This is kind of cool. Zartan is one of my favorite characters. Probably my favorite Cobra. It was like one of the first big toys I had was the Chameleon and Zartan. Zartan had a cool color change figure that if you left him out in the sun, or if you could put him in the freezer too, he would turn blue. He's a master of disguise. He had a mask. It's kind of ill defined, but he has holographic technology, so he's able to change your perception. This is what his shack hideout really looks like, but that's what it looks like to visitors that first arrive. How that works, comic book magic. So more conflict here. We're introducing more characters like you've got Mutt and Junkyard, Torpedo and Tripwire. Larry's spending a little bit of time with Deep Six, the new cast, and the old cast, the original 13, kind of gets shuffled off to the side, and it's sort of a shame. But for kids who have the toys, you got to keep bringing in the new characters. You got to keep selling the toys. And again, that's a mixed bag for storytelling. It's absolutely necessary. And then we get to issue number 26. This is where Larry is like really hitting his stride, really doing like what he wants to be doing. Script and breakdowns, and you've got Steve Lialoha finishing it. So this is all like Larry. One thing that's kind of funny about Larry, and I think this is true about like all artists, like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and just really like a lot of artists. A lot of artists draw faces like themselves. So I feel like with Larry's work, like every character kind of looks like not the Baroness, but a little bit like Larry, which is just sort of an interesting quirk. It doesn't bother me. I just kind of think it's funny. Even Stalker kind of has like a little. And Scarlet, a little bit of Larry's face in him. So this is like when we find out the meaning of this hexagram, and Stalker tells the story of when they were in Vietnam. This is Tommy Arashikage, aka Storm Shadow. They were all in Vietnam together in the Long Range Recon Patrol. Tommy saved Storm Shadow's life, Tommy saved Snake Eye's life. Storm Shadow saved Snake Eye's life, and they became quote unquote brothers. And then that leads to Snake Eyes' ninja training. And from this point on, Snake Eyes was introduced as a commando. From this point on, he's like a ninja commando. And then as the story unfolds, G.I. Joe, he becomes more and more ninja, less and less commando. In some ways, to like a detriment of the character. I like the commando version of him better. I don't really like the knight mask that he's sort of famous for. I kind of like the old goggles mask, but that's just my preference. A lot of people prefer it the other way. And meanwhile, he's hanging out with the Softmaster, and we also learn about Snake Eye's twin sister. That sort of plays into the story. Basically, the way it unfolds is when Snake Eyes returns from Vietnam, he returns to find out that his twin sister is killed in an automobile accident. A drunk driver kills her, and nobody meets Snake Eyes at the airport. And that's basically when he goes back. We find out later he's trained. The Softmaster is like an Arashikage master, and that's how he goes back and gets with Snake Eyes. There's Snake Eyes is always portrayed. I love the aviator glasses and the mask. And this is the Hardmaster. This kicks off this story. If you've seen G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, or if you don't know anything else about it, basically the Hardmaster is killed, and this is like another mystery that Larry plants for the rest of the series. Who killed the Hardmaster? And in this story, it's revealed or implied that it was Storm Shadow. Storm Shadow killed the Hardmaster, thus setting these two brothers, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, against each other. Storm Shadow apparently jealous of Snake Eyes' prowess after he brings him in to the Arashikage clan. All right. So that's kind of enough about issue 26. Again, it's another classic. You should get it. I had an extra copy of 26 in the aughts. I packed it up with a bunch of books and comic books and sent it to the servicemen in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I hope it found its way to a soldier who appreciated it. This ends up being like a two-part series. 27 is kind of a conclusion of it. And there's this parallel story where they're in Zartan Swamp and they're being pursued by the Joe team. This video is getting a little long, so I'm gonna jump ahead. This culminates in like a huge fight in New York. On the subway, this is kind of like it's like a Spider-Man Dr. Octopus kind of situation. And the other thing that we're also getting heavily into at this point in the series are the Dreadnoks. Dreadnoks, for whatever reason, ended up being like the driving villain of a lot of these like next issues. Basically, the main reason is to like sell them as toys, and then they're like really prominent in the cartoon too. In some ways, I'm sort of annoyed by the Dreadnoks. I think they like kind of take up too much real estate in the mythos of G.I. Joe. But people have different tastes. This is kind of a cool thing where there's some automatons that are set up to take on the Joes. These guys kind of look like their faces kind of look like the Techno Viper that was released in 1987. These guys are more like the Hiss Driver designs. They're like red action figures, but here they're painted blue. All those like little variants kind of pay off later if you're like a G.I. Joe fan. If you're collecting the action figures, they would get repainted you've got this guy, this sheriff that's pursuing him, sort of reminiscent of Jackie Gleason's character in Smokey and the Bandit. But then in the next page, these guys become more reminiscent of Laurel and Hardy, and Larry does that a lot, where like the cops or minions, he has them drawn or portrayed as like Laurel and Hardy or the Three Stooges, that kind of stuff. Gonna move ahead to it's a really good. I don't want to miss it. Issue number 29, a great Michael Golden cover. This is kind of considered a classic, one of the best covers. That's Destro firing on the Joe team. We introduced the whale. That's the killer whale. One of the best, coolest, and most intricate G.I. Joe vehicles. Absolutely, to that point, it was the biggest. The next year, they would release the USS Flag, which is a 7-foot-long aircraft carrier. And that was awesome. It was awesome. My next-door neighbor had that. And if you were a kid growing up in the 80s and your friend had the USS Flag, you were in for some good playtime, and you're probably a G.I. Joe fan for life. So that's kind of an interesting point about the toy versus the portrayal in the comics. Larry is seen as the godfather of G.I. Joe, and certainly he has almost everything to do with how the story unfolds, with how the characters are portrayed and everything. But we can never minimize the importance of the toy designers, all the good people at Hasbro that worked on this stuff. Many of these designs, almost all of them, were not Larry's. They were Kirk Bogosian was one of the main designers. There were a lot of different fathers and artists who were responsible for the art. On the single figure packaging, the explosion backs, and the art on those toys really sold the figures, really made the little plastic representations of them come to life. In a lot of ways more than the comic, or as much as the comic. I know kids sit and stare at them for hours and hours and hours. So this was another toy cartoon. This is the Dreadnoks. I remember the song. It's like, they can destroy and leave no traces, Dreadnoks. Evil is written on their faces, Dreadnoks. They are the fighting new foe of G.I. Joe. Sorry about the singing, but look it up on YouTube. Some great old commercials that I encourage you all to check out. And then as we get to the end of the issue, more treachery. Here we go. Billy plotting against Cobra Commander. Why would he hate Cobra Commander so much? And then we're reminded that he was a guest in Dr. Venom's dungeon back in G.I. Joe 10, but we're not yet given Billy's true identity. We're also introduced to this guy, Fred. He's a CG, or Crimson Guard, and he's Fred Broca. Broca is, of course, an anagram for Cobra. Has been surveilling Fort Wadsworth. He knows the G.I. Joe team is there, and he's trying to give his information to Cobra Commander, but he's being he's being thwarted. Right as he basically discovers the location of the Joes, he is ordered to go back to Springfield. Fred is interesting. Well, we'll see. We'll see in the next run of 10 issues. But the Fred series Crimson Guards play a pivotal part in the storytelling, and we can kind of just jump ahead. This is big attack on the Air Force Base, and then never forget. So that's it. That's classic G.I. Joe, trade number 3. Give it up to all the creative team. Give it up to everybody at Hasbro. and give it up to Larry Hama, even though I've got my beef with him, and I am doing a soft boycott of buying his work, at least as long as the lawsuit is underway. I expect that I will be back, and I will be supporting him again someday, once it is resumed. Thanks for watching, and just because I'm boycotting him doesn't mean you have to. Silent Option is his new kind of mini series. It's pretty good, by IDW. It's out right now. All right, thanks for watching.